These are some NBA players that are currently rotting behind bars, starting with Jontay Porter, who was not only stripped from his job in the NBA, but it looks like will soon be stripped of his freedom. Now, Jontay Porter has certainly made some major news due to his blatant point-shaving attempts, but how was this guy caught? What kind of sentencing is he looking at? And does this discredit the NBA as a professional basketball league? Now, early in the year, about 99% of us had absolutely no clue who Jontay Porter was, until on January 27th of this year, DraftKings would announce the highest earners of the day was cashing out 7-figure paydays on Jontay Porter unders. I mean, this is incredibly weird to begin with, given that Jontay Porter is an absolute no-name in the NBA, and anyone who is actually betting on him better call that gambling hotline immediately. But after checking out of the game early for a random eye injury, this thing got even weirder. Something was clearly off with this night from Jontay. Mobs of people were doing anything they could to put money on Jontay Porter unders. $10,000 bets, $20,000 bets. Why the hell is this enormous amount of money with terrible odds on a parlay being placed on a player who's an absolute nobody? But there was one moment in this game that absolutely blew this case out of the water. With the line set at 3.5 rebounds for the game, Jontay would clean the glass like crazy, grabbing 3 boards in 4 minutes to finish the first quarter. But after what most believe was attempting to fake crash the glass while sticking outside of the painted area, an unlikely long rebound would come his way where Jontay would basically just slap the ball to his teammate while not showing any real effort to grab the ball, then go to the bench to say his eye was affected and he needed to check out. Now, this certainly was unusual, but it wasn't until later on that Jontay Porter would be officially wrapped for this. Now, Jontay was having very suspiciously high returns for those who were taking his under, winning 7 out of 9 of his point odds. Fans like to point at his mysterious lack of effort crashing for rebounds when it appears he's reached close to his rebounding line, or how suspiciously disappointed he looks after banking this 3-ball with the line set at 0 3-balls made against the OKC Thunder. But Porter wouldn't officially be caught until the March 20th matchup against the Sacramento Kings. With a line set at 5.5 rebounds, Porter would grab just 2 boards before again checking himself out of the game due to a bellyache. Again, DraftKings would announce that Jontay Porter unders would again cash out to the tune of millions of dollars, while bettors flocked at the opportunity of putting money on this nobody at the end of the bench. Sportsbooks would notify the NBA of the betting irregularities taking place within Jontay Porter's betting markets, and of course, the trails all led back to him. Jontay was of course sitting out of games to not meet the betting lines, and as an investigation proved, Jontay was in connection with gambling professionals that knew of his early exits prior to the game. The first conspirator by the name of Long 5 Fam would be caught via Telegram logs being told of the exits prior to the game, and as it lines up with DraftKings reports, would earn in excess of $1 million off of the correct parlay. After the gambling ring was busted, on April 4th, Porter wrote in a group chat with the conspirators that they might get hit with a RICO, referring to a racketeering charge, and asked if the group chat participants had deleted all the stuff from their personal cell phones according to the complaint. Fam would be caught attempting to flee the country to Australia shortly after Porter's warning of the potential RICO, and as we sit now, Fam may be facing up to 20 years behind bars for his involvement. Prosecutors in this case would reveal Fam, as well as 2 other co-conspirators, would force Porter to shave points in order to repay gambling debts. Now, this of course is no excuse for Porter, but definitely explains the stupidity of the actions, as Porter has been traced to be very involved in casino games and cryptocurrency, and admittedly suffered from a severe gambling addiction. Porter of course would be banned for life from the NBA, which wasn't much of a surprise, making him the first player banned for gambling since Jack Molina's in the 1950s. Now, Jack Molina's has an absolutely insane story that we've covered in the past, which you should definitely watch at the end of this video. But what was interesting about Molina's story is that after his banning, he was running the largest point-shaving scandal in basketball history at the college level. When players are in need for money, which most Division I players are, I mean, despite the NIL money, these guys are millionaires outside of a select few. But these guys really have far less to lose. Compared to the NBA, where the average player is making $10 million, there's certainly reason to believe that taking a chance with this kind of risk, given that if caught it is essentially a guaranteed ban, this really raises the question that if this kind of thing is a problem in the NBA. Sports betting technology is far more advanced than us average Joes could comprehend. If an NBA player placed a bet on their phones, it would mean an absolute wrap for his career. The FBI would be at his door in 3 seconds, And with the odds tracking as well, I mean, you have to expect there's teams of statistics nerds being ready to catch the next Jontay Porter as we speak. Jontay Porter was just a two-way player making $400,000 a year, which certainly is a lot of money, but given that he had a severe gambling issue and a backbone of his older brother MPJ's $160 million deal, Porter honestly had less to lose than just about anybody in the NBA. I'm not trying to convince you that the NBA is full of good boys who would never throw a game due to their excellent moral compass, but it's been almost 70 years since we've seen this at the NBA level, and this is getting harder and harder to get away with. I mean, this Jontay Porter story was kind of an anomaly for professional sports at this level. Jontay Porter would be charged for wire fraud conspiracy, in which the logs would basically incriminate Porter on their own, before he would plead guilty to the charges. As we sit now, the sentencing has been slightly pushed back, but Porter is going to serve multiple years behind bars for this. Similar to Tim Donaghy, the disgraced referee before him who spent multiple years behind bars, the law doesn't play around when millions of dollars are at stake, and Jontay Porter is going to serve up to 4 years behind bars for his crime. Now, Glen Davis made some big news lately due to his prison sentencing for a recent NBA fraud scheme that defrauded millions from the league, but in reality, Glen Davis wasn't even the mastermind. The saga begins with Terrence Williams, the orchestrator behind a bold NBA healthcare fraud scheme that unraveled between 2017 and 2020. Once the 11th overall pick in the 2009 NBA draft, just 4 spots behind Steph Curry, Williams turned to fraud to achieve quick wealth after an unremarkable career. Williams wasn't alone, of course. He enlisted several other NBA players, including Sebastian Telfair, Shannon Brown, and of course Glen Big Baby Davis, just to name a few. But this would include 18 players and multiple healthcare professionals. These players, though no longer active, had collectively earned millions during their careers. However, instead of legitimate financial ventures, they joined a scheme that submitted fake medical claims to the NBA's health insurance plan, yielding payouts for treatments that never occurred. Basically, the way this worked was that Terrence Williams and a crooked doctor would file a claim to the NBA stating a medical procedure was done for, say, $100,000. In return, Terrence would receive a check for a portion of the cost, split it between them, and repeat the process as needed. Now, there's only so many veneers you can install, and so many prostate exams you can get a year. So Williams had to spread the love across the league, involving other struggling players, in which Williams would receive a portion of the money for handling the bookwork. While the collective haul of $5 million over 4 years may sound significant, divided among 22 participants, each person received an average of just $57,000 per year. A pretty minuscule sum compared to their career earnings. So $57,000 per year is what these dudes made for defrauding their employer and risking not only their jobs but their freedom. $57,000 per year. Now, if these guys were on teachers' salaries, I'd get it. But let's take a look at Terrence Williams. Now, Williams was a bum. This guy sucked in the NBA big time and made just $7 million over 4 years. Now let's do some simple math here. $7 million subtracted by 25% for taxes leaves you about $5.25 million in 4 years. Now, let's say that Williams balled out a bit while in his 4 years and spent half of that. Way more than you need to live, of course, but just an estimate. Now with $2,625,000, let's say this dude figured out what the hell the S&P 500 was and put his money in an index fund, and then never worked again. In this case, this dude absolutely blew his NBA career, played terrible, and never got another contract and blew half his tax money, and is still making $183,000 a year off of just putting his money in a basic investment account. I mean, these dudes should have just hired me as their advisor instead of whoever the hell told them to do this, because every player involved is an absolute moron. I mean, these guys got caught, of course. The scheme's flaws were glaring. The fraudulent claims often contained misspelled names, grammatical errors, and glaring inconsistencies, like submitting claims for treatments in cities where the players were not even present. I mean, if you're committing insurance fraud and are supposed to be the mastermind, at least spell the damn name right. That's the least you can do. But nonetheless, these guys absolutely sold the bag. Glen Davis stated he received no money from the fraud scheme, but what the courts instead found is that he had claimed $27,800 for dental work allegedly done in Beverly Hills, while cell phone geolocation data confirmed he was in Vegas before flying to Paris the same day. Similarly, Greg Smith claimed $48,000 in dental work in Beverly Hills on a day he played a basketball game in Taiwan. I mean, these guys are absolutely cooked. This is the dumbest scheme I've ever heard in my life. These errors, combined with a tip-off, led to a thorough investigation by the NBA. The fallout was insane. The law doesn't play around when it comes to white-collar crimes, and corporations like the NBA do not allow you to rob them blind. Terrence Williams, as the ringleader, received a 10-year prison sentence in 2023, which will likely leave him in prison till at least 2030. Glen Davis was sentenced to 40 months this year, which was slightly delayed, but nonetheless, this dude is still going to spend multiple years in a prison cell. First team all-dumbass Tony Allen was recommended to serve a term of 21 months by prosecutors, but squeaked by with probation as well as community service. So watch out, Grizzlies fans, you may see him picking up trash near you. Former NBA vets Keon Dooling and Allen Anderson were sentenced to 30 months and 24 months in prison for their involvement in the scam. Court documents reveal that both players held key managerial roles in the operation, recruiting other players to participate and providing false invoices to support fraudulent medical claims. Dooling, who had a long-standing reputation as a leader in the league, previously served as a vice president for the NBA Players Association. At the time of his arrest, he was working as an assistant coach for the Jazz. Anderson, who played 8 seasons in the NBA, had earned nearly $9 million during his career, also played a significant role in facilitating the scam. Ruben Patterson, Darius Miles, Eddie Robinson, Tony Roten, Jamario Moon, Chris Douglas-Roberts, and Shannon Brown all received no prison sentences. All pled guilty and were granted leniency in part because they did not recruit other players into the scam. Sebastian Telfair also luckily avoided prison time after getting out of prison shortly before for unrelated firearm charges. All of these dudes are brickheads for doing this. I mean, I don't think any guys getting tricked into stealing 50 grand from their employers as multimillionaires deserve any sympathy. They should all serve at least 10 years just for being this stupid. It's insane. But this is sadly not the only fraud scheme that NBA players have been involved in. Tate George is primarily known for one shot that even 34 years later reigns home as one of the sweetest in tournament history.
And the Huskies will have exactly 1 second remaining in this ball game to try and pull off a miracle. Just 1 second left. Burrell takes the ball, looking inbound, loops it far up court for George, who catches it, turns around, shoots, and he got it! He hit it! He hit the shot! And the Huskies have won it! The Huskies have won it! George hits the shot from the right side of the lane! And UConn wins it 71-70!
This shot certainly set him up for financial success, as after a college career averaging under 10 points per game, George would be taken 22nd overall in the 1990 NBA draft by the New Jersey Nets after not exactly being on many radars after a rather underwhelming collegiate career. It's very difficult to find footage of George during his playing days, and this is likely because through 3 years with the Nets, George averaged just 4 points per game. I mean, this guy was about as forgettable as they come outside of his collegiate game winner. As his rookie contract expired, George would play overseas before getting his final payday with the Milwaukee Bucks, scoring just 1 point per game on the end of the bench. Tate was like most people who ever make it into the NBA. A quick flyer that a couple of teams take a chance on before not quite cutting it, just to never be heard from again. But with $2 million to his name at 26 years old, it's not like he left the game empty-handed. Now, George would spend a lot of his earnings immediately after his NBA exit on things like expensive birthday parties for his daughter, multiple properties in Jersey for the summer, and a beach house in Florida when the winter came around. George would spend thousands on cars and was always the guy his buddies could call when they were low on cash. He would spend on any and everything. I mean, making millions of dollars in your 20s is something that most of us can only dream of, because this is an abnormal position that can truly set you up for the remainder of your life if managed correctly. What George struggled with, similar to many NBA players, was finding the right avenues to park his money in, as you can probably tell from his spending habits, as well as finding the next avenue to make a living. It's hard to feel bad for a 26-year-old with $2 million from playing basketball games for a living, but putting yourself in his shoes should help you understand the situation more. This was a guy that spent his time trying to find success in a career that very few make it into, before reaching that goal for only a few years. Basketball provides no other outlets really outside of playing professionally. I mean, no car dealership cares how nasty your post hook is, and now at the age of just 26, he has his whole life to live and seemingly is in the position that most 18-year-olds find themselves in, with no real direction and no real skills. Tate seemingly knew the trouble that this could cause, and with multiple properties himself, decided to get into the world of real property development. Under the name George Group, Tate's thriving investment group owned and managed over $500 million in assets across wealthy areas of Connecticut and New Jersey. Now, Tate had a bit of money that could start him off, but $2 million after spending a good portion of it can only get you so far when speaking on an industry with such high financial barriers to entry. What Tate did to make this work was leverage his NBA career, not only monetarily, but using his NBA fame and reputation to rapidly expand his enterprise, garnering investment money from people enamored by the opportunity of getting to do business with a former NBA player and were more than willing to invest in his vision. George would pitch the guarantee of regular returns to investors, and just a couple years later, Tate had more money coming in than he knew what to do with. What could be the problem? Well, Tate George was a massive fraud. George wasn't the real estate tycoon that he was branding himself as. Tate was pitching the guarantee of high-return real estate investment opportunities to schmucks whose investments were only used to pay off the last investor. With no shovels in the ground, George was certainly finding monetary success in his post-playing days. But this wasn't a real estate business. This was a classic pyramid scheme. George manipulated everyday people and former teammates and other professional athletes with the idea that he didn't need any money given his success in real estate and with his NBA money. I mean, he shouldn't need to pull a fast one on anybody. As the scheme grew and grew, all seemed well and fine. George was making more money than he ever did in his playing days, and the investors were receiving their promised returns, though none of it was from the avenue that he said it was. I mean, there was only so long that this scheme could go on. Once one of these payments failed, the pyramid would slowly collapse from the bottom up, and that's exactly what happened. The George Group had absolutely no income-generating assets. This thing was just a rather unsophisticated scam put together by a guy with very little real-life skill other than the ability to lie and manipulate people for his own good. Tate would be charged with fraud as payments stopped and investors raised red flags to the SEC about their skepticism in the man they trusted with their financial futures. Tate pleaded his case that there were reasons the developments were delayed, like he was actually planning to build a single fucking townhome, but after raising millions of dollars over a 6-year time period, the court didn't buy his act for a second, eventually sentencing George to 9 years behind bars for masterminding the scam. Tate George is a pretty sad case that you see time and time again, although maybe not to this scale. George had the job of his dreams for a short while before failing to cut it at the NBA level, and shortly after, the lifestyle he once had he surely missed. Building real businesses and acquiring assets that could produce the lifestyle that the NBA provides takes many years of grueling hard work, and would require him to take a step back and build a life in the workforce like the rest of us had to. Instead, Tate George chose to cheat his way to the top and is rotting in a jail cell as a result. Now, there's some NBA players who have certainly done some heinous things, and very few are more infamous than Javaris Crittenton. Javaris infamously destroyed his career by pulling guns on teammate Gilbert Arenas, would commit a drive-by shooting that landed him in prison for homicide after murdering an innocent woman. Javaris was released from prison silently in April of 2023 after serving out just a 10-year prison sentence for murdering a single mother. Now, Javaris may be the most infamous NBA lunatic who's now released from prison, but one that you don't hear about too much who did a similar crime and is currently rotting away in jail is Keith Appling. Now, Keith had one of the most bizarre downward spirals that basketball's ever seen, and the weird part about it is that this seemed to happen to one of the kids you'd least expect it from. Now, Appling was from a bad area of Detroit, but from an early age, this guy seemed to separate himself from the world of drugs, crime, and senseless violence through his excellence on the floor. Appling was a top high school player in America at just 6'1". He would be selected to the All-American game, he was a top 40 recruit, and had the world in his hands. Appling would go on to make a name for himself under Tom Izzo at MSU, working his way into the starting lineup as a freshman before playing at a high level as a double-digit scorer for 3 consecutive seasons. Appling seemed to have a good amount of potential and was doing the most with it. Although undersized, Appling was a notably hard worker that the world seemed to fall in love with. Izzo didn't have a bad word to say about this kid. He was a natural leader that developed at a rate much faster than many would expect. And although it's difficult to earn a spot in the modern NBA as an undersized guard, as points are getting taller and taller, Appling took the hard road grinding through the G League in hopes of eventually getting that spot. Appling spent years playing in the G League, eventually scoring upwards of 19 points per game, before the perks of his hard work finally arrived. Keith Appling received a call from the Orlando Magic, who were willing to give this kid a shot. And although it wasn't long-lived, Appling was able to achieve his dream of scoring an NBA basket. The NBA was really more of just a stepping stone into other professional basketball leagues, as he would get to travel the world playing in Italy before, out of the blue, things would begin to turn on their head. In 2017, just 1 year removed from his NBA days, Keith Appling would be found with an illegal firearm and be charged for resisting arrest. The crime seemed to be a one-off event, before playing overseas for 3 seasons, continuing his basketball career. But in 2020, Keith took a turn for the worst. Appling did not receive the payday that he hoped in the NBA, and decided to take on other avenues of making money. Appling would be charged with delivery or manufacture of 19 grams of heroin in a car he was attempting to sell in 2020, effectively ending his basketball career for a crime this serious. Appling was clearly going through a spiral of mental issues that would be worsened by this. Just 1 year later, tragedy struck, as Appling would commit a crime that would ruin his life forever. In May 2021, Appling was arrested for the shooting death of a 66-year-old man in Detroit. On February 13, 2023, Appling pled guilty to second-degree murder and a firearm charge. On March 3, 2023, Appling was sentenced to 18 to 40 years in prison. People involved in Appling's life were shocked by the turnaround. Prosecutors even seemed to feel bad for the kid. But regardless, he wasted his own life's potential and took an innocent man's life on his own. Tom Izzo personally commented on the matter, stating he never would have guessed that this was something that this hardworking young guard was capable of. The shooting was the result of a fight between the two, and unfortunately, this senseless act of violence has left an innocent man dead, a family distraught, and a once promising kid to rot behind bars for the prime years of his life. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out the one I made here on players that blackballed themselves from the NBA, and hit that subscribe button while you're here. Thanks for watching if you made it this far, and I'll see you boys in the next one. Peace out.